of your time as well. And so to everyone that is on with us so far, good morning and welcome to the Pasadena Chamber Weekly Webinar Series. We obviously cannot meet in person, but that doesn't mean that we can't continue to get together. And so thank you for joining us. We do have the chat box turned on. Aaron, our director of media, is managing that. And so we invite those of you that are with us to submit questions in the chat box, and we will later on in our presentation have time for a Q&A. And so most of you know, but for those of you that were invited, I know we have several guests who are friends of chamber members and just businesses in our community that haven't been exposed to the work of the chamber previously. Welcome and thank you for connecting with us. During this time of COVID-19, we have been focused on trying to bring the information to the business community and make information readily available, while also trying to adapt to the events that we're hosting and taking things virtual and working on community relief efforts and trying to help connect our community together. And so we, just like if we were meeting together in a real breakfast or lunch setting, we would be thanking our sponsors. And so we want to say thank you to our diamond level members who invest at the highest amount annually with us and who are really the backbone of our organization. So thank you to our diamond partners. That is what is our newest investment level for 2020, which obviously, as we made all of those changes, wasn't something we knew coronavirus was going to then kick in. And so we thank these companies for still being committed to partnering with the chamber. And then our platinum level partners who time and time again partner alongside us for events all throughout the year and really support the chamber's mission and purpose of advocating and connecting our community through educating and serving our members. And so our purpose remains the same right now, despite coronavirus and the impact that's had across our community and across the country. And so, as I mentioned, we are staying focused on working with the community to provide those resources through our community relief efforts. And so if you've not visited our website yet, there's on your screen, you can see the screenshot of our Pasadena Chamber website, where we have resources for small businesses, testing information on the community relief platform, on how we compare needs with resources, as well as information on press. And so what I have to say certainly is that for those of you that are on with us, most of you are a part of some type of association within your own industry. And in the chamber space, that is no different. So the Pasadena Chamber of Commerce is a proud member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as well as several other regional and state chambers. But the bulk of information that we have been sharing with each of you, our members, has come from the work of the U.S. Chamber, and we really couldn't be doing what we are doing right now and providing information without the support of the U.S. Chamber. So thank you at U.S. Chamber and Ron for your team, for all that you guys are doing. And so today's conversation really is about what is the next step. We've been hosting webinars on health and wellness. We've hosted webinars on leadership through adversity, and also understanding the impact of oil and gas in our community. And now everybody is trying to figure out, how do we get back to work and what's next in terms of funding. I will tell you that as we continue to talk to each of our members and we hear from you, it is great to hear the stories of those of you that got your PPP funding, and those are helping you. We obviously are excited about a return to work and doing that in a safe way. And so today's focus for the webinar is really to hear from how we can return to work and what other funding and policy is out there that we can be expecting to come. And so it's a lot of information to sift through, but we are thankful I should have asked Ron how to say his last name officially before we got started. It's like the most important question, so you don't mess up someone's name. So Ron, is it Eidshog?
That's very, very good. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. I'll take it. So we are very fortunate to have the Vice President of Congressional and Public Affairs from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Ron oversees a team of 15 full-time lobbyists and is a sought after speaker who can help really break down the information and provide it in a speak that makes sense to the common person and just has an inside perspective on Congress. And so he works as the Chamber's chief lobbyist on environmental, energy, and regulatory reform issues, and has been with the U.S. Chamber since 1999. And so, Ron, you're still in Virginia, yes, and with his wife and son, Evan. So we are thankful that you have taken the time. The U.S. Chamber has made themselves available to chambers every single week. We do a call Friday at 3 o'clock. Maybe not the time I would pick, but that's when you guys said it. And so we make ourselves available.
On Fridays. I mean, come on.
Right. True. But mentally, so we're just delighted to have you, Ron, with us this morning. And then we also have Melinda Torreson, who is the president and COO of Metter Staffing Services, who is our 2020 chairman of the board and partner in all things COVID-19. We often joke in the chamber space, chairmen are normally known for something that is accomplished that year, and she gets coronavirus. And so we couldn't ask for a better leader to really be on the front lines with us and navigating how the chamber can adapt and evolve. And so her leadership in the staffing industry across the state and leading their team is certainly relevant in having dialogue and conversation on what's next for businesses and how do we return to work and all of those components. And so it's going to be casual conversation. So for those of you that have joined us, Melinda and Ron are going to have a conversation and Q&A, and you'll have the opportunity if you want to submit questions in the chat box. And then a little bit later on, we'll focus on some of the specific outcomes from Governor Abbott's phased return to work, and hopefully will just be another source of information for those of you that have joined us. So I am going to turn it over to Melinda so that she can begin conversations with Ron.
We're so professional here at the chamber as we move our chairs and shift along. And I know some of you, I can see your names, and y'all been on so many, calls and conversations with Christina and I. So y'all know she's like we're very safe. She's one of my few people that I actually have physical contact with during these last, 6, 7, 8 weeks of coronavirus. So again, Ron, it's just such a pleasure to have you with us. And what I love about these Zoom meetings is it really is just a casual conversation. It's almost like we're at Starbucks, just having coffee together. So I just encourage each and one of you who are, on Zoom this morning with us, pick up your coffee, whatever your beverage preference is. It's not happy hour yet. We're still in coffee time. So there you go, Ron. I love it. So this has really, truly been one of my highlights during coronavirus. You got to find the positive in all things. And so it's really been these opportunities to have the benefit of technology just to connect us and bring us together. So it's so good to see you, Ron. And I guess what we're going to do is just start having a conversation again, like we're at Starbucks, just drinking a cup of coffee and like we've been longtime friends. So the first question that I do want to ask, because I know this has been so pertinent to, especially to small business and those who have been just amazingly impacted by this coronavirus, such as restaurants and really even us, at Metter Staffing. The CARES Act has been significantly important. I know that we've been in that conversation for the last 4 weeks and have been on so many webinars and have just been, living through that and actually, working to get those funds in our bank account. But I would love to ask you the question, if you could just give us just, today, April the 29th, Ron, what is the updated or overview of the CARES Act, and maybe that would be pertinent to share today to those who are online with us?
So sure. Where are things with the CARES Act? I think the best way to describe the CARES Act, and my boss sort of talked about this, is that, the CARES Act is an airplane that was launched into the air before it was built. The goal was to try and get as much money out there as quickly as possible. And, I think one of the things that we've learned with the CARES Act is it's really, really tough for the government to get money out there. And, you've got the PPP side and you've got the EIDL side. So on the PPP side, that was originally a $349 billion program. And, I forget what day the CARES Act passed. It was either a Thursday night or a Friday night. And there was already talk in DC over that weekend that wasn't going to be enough. And, within a short amount of time, it was going to be gone. That came to pass. Last week, Congress sent another $310 billion into the PPP. Christina was right. I'd love to hear any stories, or if you could email me any stories of people who have actually gotten something through PPP or EIDL. We've heard a lot of the problems and concerns, and banks didn't know what they were doing, and there were, all of this kinds of things. When you stand up a program this big, I think it's understandable that there's gonna be some problems. I think there's been a lot of credit to SBA, to the banks, to Congress, Republicans and Democrats, for trying to respond to these problems and address them. So, whether it's things like at the beginning, Wells Fargo, which does a lot of small business lending, wasn't eligible for much on the PPP program because of their consent decree for past actions. Treasury fixed that. Treasury tried to fix other things. Treasury has tried to, and SBA have tried to fix the PPP to make sure that it's going to a wider spectrum of businesses instead of just those who have a good relationship with their bank to begin with. So PPP continues to evolve. Of the $310 billion, a big chunk of that, and I think it was like $60 billion, that was set aside to make sure that it's going to businesses that may not have the most robust relationship with the bank. They've worked really hard to try and get some of the online lenders like Intuit and Kabbage and some of those other folks into the mix as well. Is that money likely to run out? It probably is. Congress is probably going to have to take another stab at it. On the EIDL side, out of SBA, new applications were open for about another day, and SBA has sort of shut that back down because they think that they're out of the additional money that they put into that program. They threw in, EIDL was originally $10 billion. They added another $10 billion for just the emergency grants, and then threw another couple tens of millions of dollars for the recovery loans. So, we're going to have to continue to work through this. And then the other problem, or the other challenge of sort of PPP, EIDL, where we're at now, and why things aren't going to change too substantially over the next couple of weeks, is that Congress really can't make changes to this program until they're back in town legislating again. What they've done is basically through unanimous consent. The Senate hasn't been in session. The Senate's expected to come back next week. The House was going to come back next week too, but yesterday the House announced that they're not coming back on the advice of the congressional physician, the House Physician's Office. So being able to do real legislation where you actually change the bill and have some votes is going to be tough. So that's I think a long way to answer the question. So we're starting to see money come out. I think that's why it's important to hear the stories I've heard stories that idle money is starting to come out. People are starting to get PPP loans. People are starting to work through the frustration. We're trying to identify some of the good stories that are coming out there, just to know, geographically where the good stories are. I think it's also important for us as the business community to highlight businesses that were saved because of these programs, to highlight how important it is for our leaders to work to save us. The program should continue to get incrementally better as we work through these problems, but I don't see big giant changes just because the situation that we're in isn't going to change substantially, overnight. So how's that for the first question?
Oh my gosh, that's so good. And I really, and we will definitely share your email address with the group, and even, probably through our chamber website to encourage people. I really appreciate you sharing that you guys want to hear the good news stories. And I think that's what we're starting to hear this week from other, large national organizations such as the U.S. Chamber, is they want to know, how has this benefited you? Has it saved your business? And so I can share just from the companies, that we're involved with and connected with here at the Chamber. There have been quite a few, Ron, that they were so excited when they did receive their PPP funds in, their bank account. And I will share too, on that note, that our community banks, such as Frost Bank and Community Bank, and there's so many others that are in our community and our region, they have really shined brightly during this, through this CARES Act, and have really come through for so many local businesses in a really big way. And, like you guys at the U.S. Chamber, working 24 hours a day, just processing applications with no rules. I mean, it's kind of like what you're sharing, that there's really not been time to be able to come together and kind of sift through everything. And you're just on a wing and a prayer hoping, okay, hopefully this will all work out. So, but I do appreciate you calling forth, us to share those good news stories with you guys at the U.S. Chamber. And so we will definitely take the opportunity to do that. And I did want to touch on, you did share that as we kind of continue to move through this, do you guys at the U.S. Chamber anticipate, a third, fourth phase, another PPP or EIDL type of loans? And how do you think Congress and the Senate how are they going to process that, as far as maybe what that will look like? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And frankly, we don't know the answer yet at this point. But there's a couple of things to look at. After 2001 and after the 2008 financial crisis, they're pretty good benchmarks for this kind of thing. And what you saw after both of those events is that in the short term, there was crisis legislation, and in the longer term, there was recovery legislation. So I think we're going to see something like that now. Right now, we're clearly in the crisis mode.
Yes.
You've got the Winston Churchill quote about, after the Battle of Britain, the air war and all of that kind of stuff. And, that was ending. And he was saying, this is not the end. This is not even the beginning of the end, but maybe it's the end of the beginning. So are we getting to the end of the beginning of the crisis mode? Probably. So we saw, the CARES Act was phase 3. Then we saw, call it phase 3.5 with more money for PPP and EIDL. Do we see some more stuff along those lines? Probably. I was talking with some folks on the Hill, and they're like, yeah, we think we're probably good on the money side. And we're like, yeah, I don't think so. You're going to be back doing it again. There's some other issues out there. Certainly the C6 issue. Right now, chambers of commerce and other nonprofit groups, many nonprofit groups, are not eligible for PPP loans. That's something we want to see fixed and have gotten a lot of attention on. Is that dealt with sort of in this crisis mode, or a little bit further on when we start dealing with recovery? It's unclear. So I don't know. Congress is going to come back to town within the next couple of weeks and begin to start working on these issues. You know, Melinda, one of the things that you're talking about is how hard the banks were working without a lot of guidance on just getting the loans out the door. I think it's really important to understand just how hard members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, you know, political leaders at Treasury, you know, worker bees, the bureaucrats at SBA and Treasury and across the government have really responded in a good way. You know, sorting out government, getting it to work efficiently is a monumental task. And when you're trying to spend $2 trillion, it's not easy to do. It's really been remarkable to see just how well people are working. And, you know, in sort of the political climate we're in, you don't always see that. And, you know, McConnell and Schumer trading barbs about all this stuff and AOC and something wacky or whatever. You know, you guys down in Texas have some folks who are not afraid to say wacky things too. Which is always nice. But I think, you know, by and large, we need to fix the situation to the extent that we can has really been the order of the day. And it's made me feel really proud to be part of, you know, just, you know, America's system and that kind of thing. So they're going to work through this stuff. It's not going to be easy. And I don't know what form it's going to take. So the crisis mode, we're going to get out of the crisis mode. They're going to have to throw some money. On the recovery side, there's going to have to be some money there too. You know, and we'll talk about this more when we get into some of the questions on reopening, but who's going to pay for all the PPE and all the stuff that we're going to need to do to protect our workers, protect our customers, protect the communities that we live in? Who's going to deal with some of the liability kinds of issues, privacy issues, all of that kind of stuff? You know, you also hear talk about sort of rebuilding and things like that, and infrastructure and those kinds of things. Those are all going to be parts of the mix, but how they're actually going to manifest themselves in a couple of weeks, we're still working on that. I think that that's also why it's really important that we continue to have these coffee clutches, because even though we're doing it virtually, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to need to do to work together to share this information back and forth, and making sure that we can continue to all work together to get some stuff done.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, it's so encouraging to hear, you know, that Democrats and Republicans were actually uniting and working together, because I think those of us, you know, on the Zoom chat, it's like all we see are the sound bites, you know, on the news and the bickering, and you're just, you know, and it's so frustrating because you're like, can we just come together for the sake of our nation? Like, we're all in this together. And so I think that's really encouraging. And I agree with you. There's really not one business that is not impacted significantly by this. You know, the healthcare industry, you know, we've heard from CEOs of hospitals in our community who are profoundly impacted. And we see the superheroes on the news fighting the coronavirus done away with. I personally had no idea the significance of how they were impacted. So I appreciate you talking about the nonprofits as well. And of course the chambers, because, you know, that's a big category of our membership here at the Pasadena Chamber. And we have so many amazing nonprofits, and, you know, we care for them and we want to come alongside and support them. And so, yeah, you do wonder what's going to be coming down the road for them. So I appreciate you sharing that. So I did want to ask you too, are there any specific policy items the U.S. Chamber is currently working on, Ron, that the Pasadena Chamber and our community can come alongside and help support?
So right now, I think the first one is this issue related to nonprofit. I think that's the one that we have enough attention and perhaps some ideas on how to fix it, to get it over the goal line. And I'll come back and talk about that more in a second. I think on some of the longer term stuff of how we're gonna fix things in the recovery mode, whether, you know, that's more money, that's and assistance, more guidance. We're working through that now. in terms of what specific things we're going to need. I'll talk about all of that in a couple of minutes. So I don't have quite as much concrete on what we're going to need to do in a couple of weeks from now. But it's going to rely on groups like yours and leaders in your communities, like the folks who are on the call, all of us working together. So, so we're going to have plenty of work, and many hands make light work on this. And so I'm going to go back now and talk about the nonprofits some more. And this gets really complicated really quickly because it's dealing with 501c status. And I did not realize how many different 501c organization types there are out there. But 501c3s, which are a lot of nonprofits, and some veteran-owned organization and some tribally owned organizations are the only organizations in the CARES Act that are specifically able to get PPP loans. C6s are chambers of commerce and trade associations. We have our own section of the tax code because we're so cool. So we are not eligible. C5s, which are labor unions, they're not eligible. C4s, which are some foundations, they're not eligible either. So there's lots of different C groups out there. But, you know, if you're working at a C group, you're probably not doing that to become a rich millionaire. You're doing that because you, in your community or your workplace or something, in some way, shape, or form. You know, if you're in this classification, you're interested in the vitality of your community, of your colleagues, of the social network and framework of where you live and where you act. So we think it is completely appropriate for PPP to be eligible to everyone, every kind of organization that's out there. That runs into some roadblocks. Some organizations, like the National Hockey League and the National Basketball Association, are C organizations. Congress does not want to bail out those organizations, nor should they. You kind of understand that. Congress also doesn't want to target money to organizations that lobby Congress. And a lot of C organizations do that. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce certainly does that. And then, you know, you all in your area have probably heard of an organization like the American Petroleum Institute. You know, they're also a C organization, a C6 organization. So, so coming up with ways to make sure that the traditional kinds of nonprofits that we're talking about outside the Beltway, non-Washington organizations that are vital to their communities are able to get money and relief in this unprecedented time is a little bit of a challenge. We've come up with some ideas of making sure that, you know, you don't include lobbyists in your calculation. You know, you cap it so that, you know, you're not bailing out LeBron James. There's ways to deal with this. There's been dozens and dozens of members of Congress. Democrats have been great, generally speaking, on this issue to sort of work through this. We actually have, in some instances, more work to do with Republicans. And so we need to work through this. One of the things that you and your businesses can do would be to talk to Cruz and Cornyn and your congressional delegation to say, you need to fix this. There's also an education issue here. Senator Cruz has been telling some folks that, oh, this is an administrative fix, and I'm going to talk to SBA to fix this. This is not something that SBA can fix. This is something that Congress needs to fix. So it's a big challenge. And I think that that's probably the nearest term target that we can do, not only to support the Pasadena Chamber, but also to support, you know, other organizations in town. So that's, again, like I said, I've been on filibuster sometimes. In the short term, that's the biggest thing. And then as we move forward, we're going to have a whole long list of things to do as we get some more concrete ideas on what's going to go through Congress.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so interesting, Ron. I think of like the quote that my dad shares. My dad's actually 81 and still he's the CEO of the company that I work with. And of course, he's like, I thought I would have been retired, but he said, I think I got to come back into the game. And having been in business for 52 years, we've been through a lot, especially here in the Houston area, hurricanes and
Yes.
multiple recessions in the oil bust. He said, in my lifetime, I've never, as a business owner, experienced a greater challenge than what we're seeing right now. So, and his quote is always, we got a lot of work to do, Melinda. We got a lot of work to do.
Yes.
So I appreciate you sharing that because we do. And I think it all boils down to relationships. So for those of us who do have relationships with, Senator Cruz and Senator Cornyn and our Congress, our local people, that's who we need to be reaching out to. And the question is, what are you going to do to fix this? To come alongside. We're doing our part. What are you going to do? You have a role and a part to play too. So I appreciate you sharing that. So now the big question, of course, that everybody's been talking about definitely this week and a little bit last week is this whole return to work plan. As Governor Abbott, of course, has come out Monday and updated us on the phases that we're going to be going through with Texas. So now business, and nonprofits are like, okay, now what do we do? So I'd love to be able to transition and start that dialogue and conversation. So I guess the first question I would ask, because I know you have a lot to share on this, what do you foresee the greatest or biggest challenge being is now we are starting to transition and phase back into people actually returning to, we've all been working. So I kind of, the return to work, it's like we've all been working harder than we've ever been before remotely. But now as we transition back into the workplace, what do you think the greatest challenge is going to be? What is that going to look like?
So I think the biggest challenge is going to be getting all of these details right, because we all share the same goals. Look, all of us are stir crazy. We all want to go back to work and get on with our normal lives. I think we all also recognize that there's big risks associated with that. So making sure that we do this right and thoughtfully and smartly and proactively and cooperatively is going to be really, really important. And, at the 1,000-foot, at the 10,000-foot level, it's relatively easy to work through these issues. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, it becomes a lot more complicated. And so I'm going to give a really long answer here. And I'm going to start it out by Donald Rumsfeld, when we were in the midst of the war in Iraq, gave a press conference about how he was going to deal with it. And he said, look, we've got known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. And that's always stayed with me. And I think it's full for discussion right now. We've got some known knowns. There's things that we know that we're going to do and we're working through them. There's some known unknowns. There's some problems that we're going to have to solve, but we know what those problems are and we can start working about them now. And then there's unknown unknowns. Problems are going to happen. There's going to be unforeseen things. If we tackle those first two buckets pretty well, we can hopefully reduce those problems that come down the road, but there's just going to be some stuff that we didn't see happening. Yeah. So in that first bucket, the known knowns, we know some stuff, and the White House has been good. They gave some very, very baseline guidance of, it's the no-brainer stuff. Do some social distancing, wash your hands, keep people socially distanced in the workplace, all that kind of stuff. And then sort of moving beyond that, they've talked about the phased work, re-entry to work into the workspace. And I know that the governor has done some of this too. What the administration has been saying in Washington is that, we've got phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 is where kind of we're either going to or where we're at, and kind of where I think the governor is at. it's sort of like, what are we going to do in the short term as we dip our toe getting back into offices, the workplace, job sites, all of that kind of stuff in terms of heavy duty social distancing and things like that. And then in phase 2, we can start having basketball games again for the kids and go back to school, maybe. And, you know, you can maybe have some less onerous social distancing. And then phase 3, you can open the break room at the office, and maybe you can start having games at stadiums with people sitting in every 4th or 5th seat. So, you know, they've been pretty good there. And then FEMA and CDC and OSHA and EEOC have started to think about some things. We saw some leaked guidance out of FEMA and CDC talking about how the federal government almost wants to do sort of like, you know, how restaurants have a window sticker in some places where you get an A, B, or C. You know, you can have some sort of credential or something that said you're trying to do your best to make sure that you're keeping your workers and your customers safe. And also some training for whether it's local inspectors, whether it's your building inspectors or your restaurant inspectors, to be your social distancing police, to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do. EEOC has had some guidance that's come out about, you know, how you treat different workers. You know, older workers and immunocompromised workers probably should be treating differently because you want to make sure that they don't get sick. Under law, you're not allowed to treat them differently. And, you know, so they've had some work in terms of what are reasonable accommodations. But also that guidance is so great. It isn't so completely fleshed out yet. And then on the OSHA side, one of the things that we're really worried about is, you know, voluntary guidance, things that you should be doing versus command and control. If you're, you know, if I come in as an inspector and you're only 5 feet 11 inches from someone, even though your desks are in the 4 corners of the office, you're getting a black mark on your record and you got to pay a fine. Those are the things that we're starting to think about. So at the baseline, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Some of it is very, very helpful. Clearly, a lot more work needs to be done. And then, you know, you move into that known, unknown category really quickly. We are going to need a lot of help dealing with regulatory certainty and legal liability certainty. So we're going to need some guidance from the federal government and from state and local governments on health training. And, you know, I'd be interested to hear your experience with this because, you know, most workplaces, we don't, you know, schools have a school nurse in a lot of, but, you know, most we don't have that in most places.
No.
At the U.S. Chamber, we've got a doctor who'll come in every couple of weeks that you can talk to, but, you know, we don't have health screenings every day. What are the standards going to be there? Why do we need standards? Well, if we don't have standards, what's the liability regime? We just go on Amazon and get a bunch of those thermometer guns. Is that enough? We can't get N95 masks, so we give everybody a handkerchief. Is that good enough? What standards are there going to be on employer for contact tracing and things like that? Then we get into other issues. Privacy is a really big issue. HIPAA. You know, as employers, we're not allowed to talk about the health status of our workers with their colleagues, but now we need to do that to keep our workers safe. And this is going to be, you know, getting back to one of your earlier questions of what are we going to need Congress to do? We're going to need Congress to fix that. We don't know what that looks like, but we're going to need Congress to fix that. And then, you know, we've got independent contractor issues. One of the guides of whether you're an independent contractor or an employee is where you get your supplies. So if I, as a business owner, start handing out PPE to my employees and my contractors, I'm doing the right thing. Do I turn that contractor into my employee then because they're getting their supplies from me? So that's one of those nitty gritty issues. And then getting back to work, what about childcare and mass transit? We're going to need our employees to come back to work. We're going to need to make sure that our employees' families are taken care of. But if they can't get child care for kids, or if they can't get to work, how are we going to get back up and running? So like I said, it's those nitty gritty details that we're going to have to all figure out as we go forward on all of this stuff. And we're going to need the government's help. We're going to need that in Austin. We're going to need that in the county seat, and we're going to need that out of Washington. And we're probably not going to get all of those answers until we're in the recovery phase of legislation out of Congress. And we're going to have to trust in a lot of areas that doing the right thing is going to be okay. So that's I think where a lot of our work in Washington is going to be focused. So how's that for a long answer?
Oh my gosh. Like you and I could be like your friend right now. Like you're just speaking my language. Because this is like everything that I'm, that goes on in my head. I'm sure, others who are on the phone. And of course we encourage you guys, go ahead and, start putting any questions that y'all might have as we kind of, eventually move into our Q&A. But just speaking as just, a business owner, that is what goes on in my mind is, we have a mission and a vision for the company that I work with and core values. And one of our core values is we have a heart for people in the community. And I think that's what drives us to just do the right thing. And so I think there's the heart of most business owners, they just want to do the right thing. And they want to be able to, provide a service, and stay in business and keep their employees working. But then you also, in the back of my mind too, in working for a staffing company, we have thousands of people working for all different types of companies, that we're accountable and liable for. And I think as a business owner, I'd probably say, my greatest fear, as probably many is somebody going to come back and file an EEOC claim against me? Is somebody going to go to OSHA? But there's really no guidelines. You're trying to follow the CDC guidelines and the rules. Really, like I said, in the long run, it's just doing the right thing by your people. But yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, what world have we? I know too much about people's medical history now that I never, used to know. And you're like, I'm not supposed to know this. This is what HR, taught me. I'm not supposed to know this. But now you have to know in order to do the right thing. So I think as a business owner, and maybe some of you feel free to share again in the chat room if you feel the same way, that you want to do the right thing, you want to keep people employed, you want to get back to work, you want to keep your business going and hopefully thriving eventually. But with the mindset of, could this all come back on me, and 6 months from now or 12 months from now, I'm going to get in trouble for something I didn't do, or that I did do that I thought was the right thing to do. So it is just all those questions that kind of swirl in your head. So I guess I have to ask you, Ron, if you were, of course you're with the U.S. Chamber, so step into your alter ego and you're Ron and you're running this you're the owner of like Amazon, you're Jeff Bezos. So you're doing all kinds of cool stuff out there. What would be top of mind for you as a business owner if you were running a business? What would you be looking at first and foremost to return to work and doing the right thing and taking care of your employees? What some practical just steps, what would you be looking at and doing?
Well, I think number one, the thing that I would be doing would be engaging with my local chamber as much as possible to hopefully share the benefit of all the shared wisdom of my colleagues. And I think this really is one of the important times for chambers and business leaders to share and work together on this stuff.
Absolutely.
To answer your question directly, if I'm Jeff Bezos or one of those giant mega companies, I'm worried about getting sued my pants off. And I think Jeff Bezos or some of those mega companies can afford to worry about that because they've got teams and teams of lawyers. What I'm really worried about as a chamber guy is those, companies that are several orders of magnitude smaller than those mega companies that don't have those teams of lawyers and things like that. And I don't know if you all ski or mountain bike, but I was looking the other day that there was a class action suit against Vail Resorts. So Vail Resorts owns Vail. They own Whistler up in British Columbia. We go up there every year to mountain bike, and they sell annual passes. And trial lawyers got together and are suing Vail because they got shut down so people couldn't use their passes for the entire season. Now look, if companies are doing the wrong thing, workers need to be able to get together and deal with their employer. But in this situation that we're in, employers that are doing the right thing are going to be confronted, unless Congress does some of the right stuff, with a lot of this liabilities. And really, frankly, I think that that's one of the things that in DC and at the US Chamber, we're going to be assuming a lot of responsibility for. Working on this liability safe harbor across all of the different areas that we're working on. We've got 3 separate groups of multiple task forces dealing with how we're going to deal with reopening. On the return to work side, we've got 4 different task forces of companies that are dealing with all of these issues. And the issues that we hear most about are liability issues. We also hear consistency issues. So if I go over the county line and then all of a sudden there's 2 different standards, in one county it's N95, in the next county it's wrap a t-shirt around your face. How do you deal with those different things? Because that uncertainty is really, really difficult for businesses, even small businesses, to deal with, probably especially small businesses to deal with. Then how are we going to create an environment where our workers feel safe coming back? And Melinda, talking about some of those issues about how you know so much more about the health status of your workers now. I was talking with someone from a big company yesterday, and they're like, on the one hand, I need to keep my employees safe. On the other hand, I am going to have to confront the reality that we're going to have to do some downsizing. And I am monitoring my workers now on a voluntary basis. What can I do to make sure that my employees understand that I'm not going to screw them if they share their employee with me? If they're sick, I'm giving them 2 weeks. I don't want you at the office. I'm going to pay you everything. I'm going to pay you. And I don't want you, you're not getting a scarlet C on your record if you're, but is the employee going to feel like, if I'm sick, am I just a candidate for downsizing? How can I create that certainty?
Oh my gosh.
So, I think those are some of the issues that we're trying to confront. And those, I think, are the biggest baskets. And then there's a whole host of other ones in there too. And before I get off of it, we've also got another task force where we've got the state chambers from all the states, and then Puerto Rico and the district as well, talk, and their biggest thing has been that consistency issue. And they are sort of, TAB has certainly got boots on the ground in Austin, figure out what we can do to minimize discrepancies between what Washington is doing and what states are doing, and can try to work that out on the different levels and the nexus of state and federal.
Oh my gosh, we're just living the dream, aren't we? Oh my goodness. Yeah. And it's so interesting you bring that up. And my mind really hasn't gone to that place yet, but I know so many businesses in Houston, have already had, incredible furloughs, layoffs, because not only is the Houston economy dealing with COVID-19, we're also dealing with the oil and gas war. And so it is just like this double whammy impact. So, you know, it's just overwhelming. So that's really such a good question. And I know a lot of companies, there's so many good companies out there, and especially in the Pasadena community, that are really, if you have really good leadership, you're going to come out of this, I believe, in a better way, because you're learning lessons as you're going through this. Like, hey, we can do Zoom meetings instead of having everybody come to a corporate office. So we're learning a lot, but it is, I do believe and agree with you, Ron, that, you know, not just because of economics, but there might be better ways of doing business with fewer people. So you're right. If you do start letting people go, is it going to come back where it's not, they're looking at it not based on performance when it actually was, but hey, you used an illness or a sickness that you knew about against me. So yeah, this whole HR employment law world is just going to get really crazy. And then you do unfortunately have those attorneys out there, which I've, you know, heard on a lot of webinars that it's already happened in California with the billboards, you know, we're up the commercials at 2 a.m. in the morning while you're, you know, online shopping, that, hey, you think your employer's done you wrong? Give me a call. And I think, you know, I think that's what businesses are aware of, but I just feel like you have to, again, at the end of the day, you have to do the right thing. You have to lead. Your mission is to stay in business for the sake of your employees, for the economy, and small business really is the heartbeat of America too. So, but I would ask again, I know we're, I think it's about 9:25, so we're about to wrap up, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to share. And I just would say to you, Ron, I mean, I really do appreciate you, you know, taking the time to be with us today. And like I said, I'm going to get your number and your email from my friend Christina here, and hopefully be able to reach out to you as well. But you are definitely a resource for us. And I agree with you. I think now more than ever before, we have to be connected. We are meant to be in relationship. We're not meant to be disconnected. And it's not just through, you know, social media. It is, we've got to be having conversations like we're doing right now. And we have to rely on each other. And so that's what I love about this whole thing is I can't do this alone. I need each of you that are on this Zoom call. I personally need each one of you. We need each other, and because we are better together, and for the sake of our community. And like you said, I really appreciate you too, Sharon, just the benefit of chambers right now, because a lot of our small businesses they're hurting. And so how do we change up everything that we do here at the Pasadena Chamber? And it's not just about your membership dues. It's how do we just be innovative and relevant? Because if we truly are what we say we are, and that is an advocate for business and nonprofits, and we need to step up to the plate and be that. So I appreciate you sharing that. So are there any last words that you would want to share with our group this morning before I hand it over to Christina?
So yeah, so number one, I'm very proud of chambers generally and Pasadena Chamber specifically. So, you know, when this crisis first emerged and we knew that businesses were going to be hurt, at the U.S. Chamber, we were thinking about what we're going to be able to do to help and support chambers like yours. And, you know, we're friends. We work together. You know, John and Monique out of our Dallas office. You know, we're all in this together, you know, during the normal times, and we need to be there for each other now. You know, I was on the phone yesterday doing a Zoom chat with folks in Anchorage, and, you know, we were talking about the double whammy of oil and COVID too. And, you know, dozens of my colleagues back at the main headquarters are doing exactly this now. We do so I work on the lobbying team, and
Okay.
one thing that we do is we do a night note. So we do a 2 or 3 page rundown of what we did during the day. Usually it's on the hillside, and, you know, whatever group was in town and whatever progress we made, you know, reaching out to Senator Cruz or whoever on whatever the is. And seeing the amount of, over the last several weeks of back and forth and sessions and Zooms and coffee clutches and lunchtime and happy hours that we've done with our friends from across the country and all of these things has really been gratifying because, you know, on the one hand, there's a lot of desperate businesses out there. There's a lot of desperate communities. You know, times are tough. But we've also seen tremendous resilience, tremendous cooperativeness. You know, we've had to reinvent how we do business and get together through all this Zoom stuff. But we've also been able to make a difference with our local elected officials, our congressional elected officials. So, you know, I'm very disappointed that we can't see you in DC like we're supposed to in a couple of weeks. I'm disappointed that I can't come out and see you for a little while, at least. But, you know, continuing to make sure that we can do what we're doing on this stuff is really important. We transitioned from the crisis mode of how do we apply for a PPP to what's up with PPP, to what we're going to need to deal with to reopening, to the problems that have emerged and how we're going to solve them, to what's out there on liability relief. We've got a lot more work to do. My job from the U.S. Chamber to support what you're doing. I said this earlier. If you guys can funnel emails into me, if Christina can collect them, only because I don't want to lose them. We're getting a lot of incoming, so if I can just make sure that I'm getting an email from someone I've gotten an email before, so that I make sure that I can respond to it so I don't lose it in the deluge. I want to make sure that we're getting the information out to you. John and Monique are continuing to be a resource. Any of us you can reach out to. Jocelyn and my other colleagues, we're here to do whatever we can to help. So if you've got good news, if you've got bad news, we need to hear it. We're going to continue to share all of that information. And, you know, like I said, I'm not slagging on Senator Cruz when he needs education on what it means for C6s. He just needs to learn. He's dealing with an awful lot of stuff. And like I said, Republicans and Democrats are dealing with it really well. And they got a lot to learn because this is unprecedented times.
Absolutely.
Whatever we can do to help educate Senator Cruz and Senator Cornyn and your House guys, we got to do this together. And we're here for you, and we're just glad to do it.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to turn it over to Christina. And, you know, as we transition, Ron, I just personally, on behalf of myself and our board of directors here at the Chamber of Commerce, it's been a pleasure and a privilege having coffee with you this morning. So Christina and I are going to do our professional transition like we do all the time. Here we go. And to close us out.
Thanks, Melinda. And thanks, Ron. I think you summed up so much of just the questions that we've received and from our members and businesses, from the community as a whole, of understanding that this isn't over and there's a lot of work still to be done. And I think what you said, I was writing furiously when you started talking about the knowns and the knowns and the unknowns and the unknowns. And as confusing as it sounds, it's also it makes perfect sense because that is the situation that we're in. And so there's still a lot to be discovered and a lot of work to still be done. And so again, we just appreciate you and want to be a partner in it and really just try to help those businesses navigate some of it. We did have one question come through that I want to ask that most of the others were answered as you were talking. And so, but this one, if somebody who has applied isn't getting information from the bank on a PPP loan and real clarification as to why they can't be approved, would you recommend, Ron? I know what I would be telling those folks if they reached out, but would you recommend that they engage potentially with another financial institution if they've already started the process, if they're running into a wall there? Or would you, we've not had a lot of response on any kind of proactive response from CARES funding in and of itself of where to go if it's not working the way that we understood it should be?
That's a good question. And it's difficult without knowing all the specifics, but I think what I would say is I would start with that bank first. So what we've heard is that some banks were declining loans, but only because money ran out. Also, one of the things that Treasury and SBA are going to do is they're going to limit the amount of money that some banks can actually authorize. So if you're going to a big national, what the problem that they're trying to solve is that, you know, if you went to Chase or Wells Fargo or
that was the bank. If that helps you with your answer, it was Chase.
Okay. So I would reach out to them because it could be one of two things. It could be that Chase is through their allotment and Treasury is trying to limit the allotment so that, you know, the community banks can make sure that they're writing to their guys. The goal is to try and make sure that they're getting everybody in the small business community, not just people who are dealing with the big banks. So I would ask them if it's a problem related to the money that they went through. If they got that response before last week, if it was a question of money being out of the PPP at that time, and now that there is more money back in the PPP, if they could perhaps be eligible, I would talk with them, and then, you know, if they get an unsatisfactory answer, then it might not be a bad idea to try another bank. Generally, though, we've been trying to tell people to not bank shop because if you're applying at more than one bank, that could impact your ability to get a loan. Also, so I think I would ask them and start there. I'm assuming that that's going to be a frustrating process trying to get someone to talk to, but I think knowing what it's the assumption that I'm operating under is it's not you, it's them, because you know the requirements on the PPP are pretty straightforward in terms of, you know, FTEs and all that kind of thing. So I would try to get information on whether it's a problem with the business or it's a problem with the bank.
Perfect. Thanks, Ron. And we can certainly, it's hard to see everybody's screen names on exactly who that is. So for the individual that submitted that question, if you want to reach out to us as well and one-on-one here at the Pasadena Chamber, we can certainly try to help provide some additional guidance and from that standpoint. And so again, and as Ron mentioned, we want to help funnel those stories and the questions. And so we have locally been doing, Aaron runs our Discover Pasadena online talk show. And so we've transitioned that show into a Pasadena Cares and telling the positive stories of how businesses are engaging in the community. And so as you were talking, Ron, you gave us our next idea, which is now also telling the positive stories of folks getting their PPPs and talking about the financial institutions, because we've not done a spotlight on that. So so would love to get story ideas from anybody that's on here, and we'll share that. And so send that to us, and Ron, we'll be sure to share that information with you guys as we get those stories, and just continue to try to share the positive news as everybody continues to transition back to work. And so your information has certainly been very helpful, and I know that in the days to come, we will continue to talk. You know, everybody, I think, gets an inundation of emails, and you flag certain ones, and the ones that I flag are from the nightly debriefs from the U.S. Chamber, from John and Monique and the team. And so we just certainly appreciate, again, all the work that you guys have done. And so thank you again, and let us know as we can help sign on. We have signed on to multiples and sent letters to Senator Cruz and Cornyn. And so we will certainly continue to educate and have conversations with their teams. And I think that's really the thing right now, is people just trying to understand, and knowing where to go for the information is the biggest challenge. So thanks for your help and allowing us to provide that resource to our members. So we will close by just saying we appreciate you all for joining us today. As we have talked about, just trying to make resources available during this time. And so today actually is Operation Stock the Shelves for us here in Pasadena. What better way to do that than with a thunderstorm and rain outside? It's not exactly chamber weather, but we're going to make it happen. And so that's why you see Melinda and I a little more casual than usual in our chamber t-shirts, because we're going to get ready to be outside collecting cans from what we hope is a large response from our community. And so just want to say a special thank you to all of the churches who have been involved in this initiative. And so all around the city today, we've got about 20 churches who are collecting foods in a drive-through manner. And here at the Chamber, with the help of Turner Industries and the Pasadena Economic Development Corporation, where we are going to have folks drive through and drop off so that we can help restock the 10 food pantries here in Pasadena that are really trying to help meet the needs of our community members and neighbors that need support during this time. So we are going to transition from here right outside to that, and hope for a great response there. And you can see on your screen several of the other upcoming events that we have going on with Coffee and Conversations, where we're just able to connect, and then our virtual membership 101, so that we can continue to educate members how to take advantage of the benefits that are a part of their investment. And then I know we talked a lot about return to work, and Aaron had a slide. And so I just wanted to call everybody's attention as well on the fact that obviously here in Texas, there is a phased opening approach. And so it's a long document. As Ron mentioned, there's lots of details, and it's not as easy as, everyone can open for business in 25% capacity. It's not that simple. And it depends on the type of industry and who they are. And so if you haven't had the chance to really dig into the specifics of local here in Texas, the report to how to open, you can find that on the Chamber website as well. So just know that the resources are there, and we just look forward to continuing to be a partner for our community and helping everyone, try to, as Melinda has said, remain innovative and relevant and a resource during this time. And so at the Chamber, we're here to connect you in whatever way that makes sense for you. And we know it's different for everyone. So Ron, thank you again for joining us. And we hope things in Virginia continue to stay busy. And I did pick up coffee clonch, I think is what you were saying.
That's the New York in me.
Okay, I'm like, that is definitely not something that would make sense in Texas, but we're always trying to brainstorm, and we like to use the term R&D, right? Instead of research and development, it's rip off and duplicate. Not sure I can duplicate that one and people will get it in Texas, but I love learning nonetheless. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody else that joined. We will certainly make this available for folks online, so that you can share it with other colleagues and businesses within y'all's network of the valuable information that Ron shared with us from the U.S. Chamber. So thank you again for your support, and everybody have a great day. And if you are so inclined, drive through and drop off some non-perishable goods so that we can help with Operation Stock the Shelves. You guys have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.